seeing 4,000 cases at least in NCR by the end of the month. What we have seen is that there is definitely an increase in transmission or infections for minors. There are more household transmissions because we know that minors are generally not allowed to go outside.
The Octa Research Group is raising its national projection to 7,000 cases per day by the end of the month. The group is tracking increasing infections among minors, which might indicate transmission in households.
This comes as infections rose to a 6-month high today. Close to a year since lockdowns were put in place, local governments revert to implementing curfews and cracking down on violators. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Localized lockdowns and now uniform curfew hours will be put in place in Metro Manila by next week in an effort to curb rising infections.
According to the Octa Research Group, daily cases in the country may even reach 7,000 by the end of March. JC Cosico with The Big Story.
These Quezon City residents on board a bus are bound for the QC Memorial Circle. But they're not on a trip. They are part of the more than 1,700 residents apprehended for not wearing or wearing face masks improperly.
Gusto namin i-showcase na ganitong karami nahuli natin, ganitong karami nagbabiolate sa Quezon City.
Average daily cases in the city are now at 240 compared to 80 last month.
Unfortunately, ay hindi na pa-practice yung minimum health standard, no? Kaya nagkakaroon ng hawahan, ano?
The city also recorded 13 cases of the UK variant and 4 cases of the South African variant. To date, 19 areas in Quezon City are under special concern lockdown. This is now the case for most Metro Manila cities, with LGUs reverting to restrictions similar to those implemented a year ago when lockdowns were implemented.
Community quarantine is hereby imposed in the entire of Metro Manila and in other areas.
Back then, the country only had 600 cases. 1 year after, infections have climbed past 600,000. Still, the health department says the country's COVID-19 response has improved.
Nakikita natin na ang ating mga healthcare workers, mas sanay na sila at gamay na sila how to handle our COVID-19 cases.
But with cases reaching new highs, uniform curfew hours of 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. will once again be implemented in Metro Manila for 2 weeks, beginning Monday, March 15.
Siguro dahil naging lax na rin po itong ating mga kababayan, COVID fatigue, no? Talagang hindi na nagmamas, talagang baliwala na sa kanila, plus humalo pa itong variant na ito.
Octa Research expects daily cases in Metro Manila to reach at least 4,000 by the end of the month. As for infections nationwide,
it could go higher than that, an average of maybe 4,500 cases, and in the whole Philippines, maybe 6,500 or 7,000 at least.
They also flag increasing transmission inside homes with more cases of minors testing positive for the virus.
We have anecdotal data on increased transmission in households, but what we have seen is that there is definitely an increase in transmission or infections for minors.
They now call for additional restrictions, such as limiting capacities in establishments and offices. For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
For the people tracking the numbers, how bad do they see cases rising in the next few weeks and what should be done to arrest that? To talk more about this, we have Octa Research Fellow Guido David. Professor David, welcome to The Big Story.
Yes, hi, good evening, Robbie and Gretchen.
Hey, Professor David, one thing that was mentioned, the higher transmission rates in the households. You're particularly concerned about minors. But what's the context with minors? Are they at home or not? Are they going out or not? How is it that it is the minors that we have of this particular concern?
Well, that's a good question, Robbie. I'm not outside most of the time to know if they are going out. I do have seen some minors outside sometimes when I go out, so that's just anecdotal. Based on the other variants that we're looking at, they report more household transmissions and more transmissions to minors, or more infections with minors. So that's one of the bases, but we are actually seeing it in the data.
Okay. Now, when we talk about minors, obviously we're talking about behavior of people. Government has been saying, look, let's not be lax, and they keep emphasizing, again, the behavior of people. But how much of this is in fact being driven by the new variants?
Well, that's a good question, and it's really difficult to answer that considering that we have very limited biosurveillance because, of course, biosurveillance and genome sequencing takes a lot of resources, and which we don't have. A country like UK, they can do genome sequencing for all their cases, siguro, pero not in the Philippines. So the best that we can do is maybe get a sampling of prevalence of these variants. But for sure, we have seen that there are some UK variants in Metro Manila, and then a few South African variants. But what we are seeing based on the numbers is that this is a trend that would not be possible if it was just the original variant that was spreading, what we call the D614G. So we don't think that version of the virus is capable of spreading this quickly, especially to households and minors, because we haven't seen that kind of event happening before. So now that we're seeing this, it means that maybe the game has changed, the rules have changed, and that's why we must be now more careful about, and more strict about our health protocols.
Dr. Guido David of the Octa Research Group, maraming salamat po. And we will continue that conversation about how the rules in the game is changing in the Chiefs immediately after the big story. Meanwhile, a year since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic, the Philippines continues to report record high daily infections. Tonight's big number, 4,578. This is the total number of new COVID-19 cases as of this afternoon. That is the highest daily infection rate in nearly 6 months. This brings the country's total caseload to more than 611,000. That compares to only 52 total cases on the same day last year.
These are the other big stories tonight. Despite reports of adverse effects in Europe, the health department says the country will still continue rolling out AstraZeneca shots. The NBI files charges against 11 people over the death of flight attendant Christine Becerra. Her friends were slapped with drugs and obstruction of justice charges. And a search for the next Chief Justice begins, with 3 magistrates vying for the top post, answering questions from the Judicial and Bar Council. These big stories after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Outside homes, experts and local executives are looking into public transportation as a major driver of infection. But are drivers and commuters to blame? Let's find out from mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, giving you a front seat to the story.
Early morning at the transport terminal in Marikina. This is commuting at the time of COVID. Commuting has been part of our daily life, but now that the public transportation is becoming more prone to COVID-19 transmission, even the slightest inobservance of the health protocol poses a greater risk of contracting the virus. The health protocols for commuting are clear: physical distancing, sanitize always, and contact tracing. But here, the queue bunches up. Contact tracing and temperature checks are often forgotten.
Yung sa amin, nasira yung yung temperature namin.
People don't bother wearing their mask properly, while many drivers do not bother to sanitize between trips. 1 year into the pandemic, it is clear that the realities are different on the ground. Public transportation has emerged as one of the major drivers of COVID infection, at least according to Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro. In the span of a week, Teodoro says Marikina's new cases went up from 277 to 409.
Ito yung lumalabas sa contact tracing namin. Pag inaalam namin kung sila huling nagpunta, kanilang huling contact do sa maraming tao.
For Elsa, who commutes every day, this is a very real concern.
Yung barrier, yung plastic, hindi siya consistent. Supposed to be, ang spacing, dapat malaki ang spacing.
But signals from the government can be confusing. The Labor Department recently pushed for an increase in the capacity of public transport so that more people can go to work.
But of course, safety measures should be also put in place as well.
Teodoro, however, says increasing capacity is not the solution. What people need are more public utility vehicles, not more people cram into jeeps and buses. In the meantime, people who commute to work will have to fend for themselves. Mayor Teodoro revealed that according to their projection, more cases will be reported in the coming days. That is why he's appealing to the public to remain vigilant and follow health protocols. I'm Pamela Vasquez and we are One News.
While Metro Manila struggles to contain a spread in COVID-19 cases in Dumaguete City, residents are taking a proactive stance in battling the virus. How exactly do they curb the spread of infections? Marian Enriquez tells us.
The city of gentle people might just be the city of the most disciplined Filipinos. Anywhere in Dumaguete, everyone wears a face mask.
Nasanay na rin kasi 1 year na din eh.
Panigurado lang kami para sa COVID.
Since January last year, residents have been proactive in combating COVID-19. That's after a traveler from Wuhan, China, who was the index COVID-19 case in the Philippines, reportedly stayed in the city. From December to February, the city logged some 80 active cases. That has since been reduced to 7 active cases.
Makikita mo yung mga bata, mga matatanda nasa boulevard, nag-face mask or face shield yan sila. Okay? May nag-observe.
The whole province, Negros Oriental, has 98 active cases, with 55 deaths. The Provincial Health Office said having their own molecular laboratory contributed to their pandemic response, with test results out in a day. Aside from local isolation facilities, the provincial government also has its own isolation beds in case of a surge. They are also aggressive in contact tracing.
Yung contact tracer namin na head in the province of Negros Oriental, talagang nag-town by town siya ng lecture.
In line with an IATF resolution, those entering the province no longer need to undergo RT-PCR tests. They only need to sign a health declaration form and be interviewed by health officers. Those with influenza-like symptoms will undergo swab testing.
But the local government of Dumaguete strongly opposed the scrapping of RT-PCR requirement for travelers. Mayor Felipe Remolio suggested that at least 70% of their population must be inoculated first before easing travel restrictions.
For Dumaguete's local executive, balancing the economy and public health is a big challenge.
Malaki na nilift na natin yung quarantine. That's a big help already for business. Okay, but to let go of the requirement of RT-PCR would be a very big mistake.
An RT-PCR test result is still needed to secure an acceptance certificate from the city government. This certificate is required in hotels and accommodations in Dumaguete. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
The health department sees no problem in pushing through with the use of AstraZeneca vaccines despite reports of adverse effects in some European countries. The likes of Denmark, Norway, and Iceland have suspended the use of AstraZeneca in their inoculations due to reports of blood clots among vaccine recipients. Thailand has followed suit. The Philippines has received more than 500,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccines through the COVAX facility. Elderly frontline health workers have since been prioritized to receive the jabs.
Wala pa tayong nanonote no, ng mga ganitong incidents. Although, of course, ang country natin would always monitor no, this kind of incidents. Everything will be undergoing the official process of causality assessment.
Time for an extra's look at some of the day's big stories. PNP Chief General Debol Sinas has tested positive for COVID-19. Police Brigadier General Ildebrandi Usana said the results of Sinas's RT-PCR test indicated that he is positive for the virus. PNP Deputy Chief General Guillermo Eleazar was appointed as officer in charge while Sinas is under quarantine. The PDP Laban leadership has rejected calls of its members for President Rodrigo Duterte to run once again in the 2022 elections. Senator Manny Pacquiao, PDP Laban acting president, said that the resolution released by the group was not authorized. He then appealed to his party members to focus on helping people affected by the pandemic instead of politics. The latest on the death of flight attendant Christine Becerra, the NBI has filed criminal charges against 11 people, including her companions the night of her death. Charges include a violation of Section 3 of the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, perjury, obstruction of justice, and reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. The NBI said there are large inconsistencies in the PNP's autopsy report. Time for another quick break. When we return,
months in quarantine. 12 months of battling the coronavirus. 12 months of living in a new normal. This March 14, One News brings together the people who helped shape the way we live in the year of pandemic. How have we managed? What we may have missed? Where are we headed? Some of the country's leading voices in the scientific and business communities face the nation as the Philippines balances public health and economy. Kumusta na ba tayo? A town hall in the time of pandemic. Moderated by Robbie Alampay and Cheryl Cosim. Join us live March 14, Sunday. We are One News.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Face masks are used to protect us against COVID-19, but its improper disposal has been causing harm against marine life. Romel Lopez with the story.
Either entangled in corals or under the reef, face masks have been littering the seabed along Caban Cove in Tingloy, Batangas. These underwater videos captured by NLO divers including Oliver show the new normal underwater.
Nakaka-average kami, anong tawag nun, mga 2-3 masks. Lalo yung mga cove areas, yan ang marami.
For divers, it's heartbreaking that today's primary form of protection is hurting marine life.
Yung tapon ng mga mask dyan, okay, pag tinatapon nyo naman yung mask, check nyo naman para ayos naman yung pagka-dispose ng mask ninyo.
Mga marine life, for example, pawikan, they might mistake it as food. If they eat it, they ingest it.
The LGU of Mabini said that this is an isolated case as they properly manage medical waste such as PPEs and masks. They also constantly conduct a cleanup drive.
Hindi rin namin masasabi in particular kung saan talaga ang source nitong mga basurang ito. Wala pang pandemya ay nagkakaroon na din ng mga kaunting basura itong particularly itong mga ganitong klaseng cove.
Fearing that this might be happening across the country, divers advocate the use of reusable masks.
Studies show na effective naman si reusable or mga washable mask. Why not use your washable mask para just to lessen ba?
The DENR urges LGUs to properly dispose PPEs and masks.
Dapat na mga local government unit, meron silang lugar na pwedeng i-treat yan, and then before they finally to be disposed sa landfill. So i-strengthen natin yan.
The agency added that they are also monitoring inlets or estero where informal settlers may improperly dispose waste. For News 5, Romel Lopez. We are One News.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. The search for the next Supreme Court Chief Justice officially begins. According to the Philippine Star, first to face the Judicial Bar Council was Senior Associate Justice Estela Perlas Bernabe. She vows to remain a textualist. Associate Justice Alexander Jesmundo vowed to continue the review of rules started by outgoing CJ Diosdado Peralta. Associate Justice Ramon Paul Hernando says he will address case backlog and the construction of courts. Business World reports imports continue to contract for the 21st straight month, falling by 14.9% in January. After 2 months of growth, exports also slipped back to negative territory, sinking by 5.2%. This brings the country's trade deficit to $2.4 billion. And from News 5, consumers may soon see a price hike in poultry and processed meat products, including chicken wings. This as the Agriculture Department bans imports from the UK, Netherlands, and Germany. According to the Philippine Association of Meat Processors, imports from these countries make up more than half of the supply for deboned meat, the main ingredient in processing meat products.
And here are some of the big stories around the world. U.S. President Joe Biden denounced the violent attacks against Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. Biden called such attacks as un-American and demanded that they stop. A surge in anti-Asian attacks in the U.S. has been reported since the start of the pandemic.
At this very moment, so many of them are fellow Americans. They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, they're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop.
Former U.S. Presidents Barack Obama, George Bush, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter have appeared in a national ad campaign aimed at building confidence in COVID-19 vaccines. The ad also shows former First Ladies being vaccinated against the virus.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
We've lost enough people and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens
to get vaccinated.
For the big story in the world of sports, the Philippine Olympic Committee is looking to field a total of 626 athletes in the Southeast Asian Games later this year in Vietnam. This is a little over half of the 1,115 athletes that participated in the event hosted by the Philippines in 2019. Sports officials are now keeping a modest target of a podium finish in the upcoming SEA Games after securing the overall title in 2019 with a historic medal haul. SEA Games-bound athletes have started their bubble training in the provinces, but a full-blown training is scheduled by April 15 in various venues in the country.
Vaccination against COVID-19 may be considered an occasion, and as they say, you have to get dressed for the occasion. Take this employee from Cardinal Santos Medical Center in Pasay. For example, he donned a costume of the web-slinging Spider-Man as he got a shot. The CSMC has been vaccinating its staff since March 5. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, it's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's a doctor wearing his Superman costume as he administered shots. He does this to make inoculation less daunting.
That's really amazing, seeing your superheroes in costumes get vaccinated. Very
speaking
inspiring.
of superheroes, we should have done that yesterday.
Bakit kahapon?
Because a rarer sight than Superman and Spider-Man, Gretchen Ho came yesterday as a Green Archer.
Now, I'm a blue Lady Eagle again.
Bumabawi yan dahil na-troll kahapon ng mga Atenista.
Yin and yang. Hindi, wala naman akong problema sa mga Ateneo tsaka sa Lasal. Sa UP yata. Joke lang. Well, all the love for volleyball. It's nice to see all the players from all the schools come together in one league. Very big historic day. Heading into the weekend, that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again Monday at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Gretchen Ho, and we are One News. Good evening.